Welcome to On Air with Dr. Pete. I'm your host, Dr. Pete Economou, and I am thrilled to be here today to talk about leadership. We are going to dive into this fascinating world of leadership, exploring the psychological principles that separate good leaders from truly exceptional ones, and then the not so great ones. And so, this is something that we do as psychologists where we might be doing some kind of executive coaching or personnel assessment and helping organizations function at the best level. And certainly that does impact how people lead and the leadership styles. So let's look at this. Leadership isn't just about holding a title or position. It's about influence. There's different types of leaders. There's democratic, transformational, and these are people that are just trying to, authoritative. These different leadership styles are not good or bad. And so when I do a lot of this in either the corporate world or in the sports world, it's to say that you want a little bit of balance. At certain points in time, you want different kind of leaders. You might need an authoritative leader from time to time, even though that might be seen negatively. And this is a leader who sort of dictatorship, like it's just very single-lined, top-down, what I say. And sometimes not as I do. And again, in times of high stress, in times of really intense change, you kind of want someone like that. Whereas a transformational leader is really going to think about mission and buy-in and collaboration. Democratic will also be more collaborative in that kind of way. And so one of the things that I look at is that it's not just right or wrong, but it's about what's right in that time. So what are other sources of influence when you think about it? It could be expertise. What's someone bringing to the position? What's their charisma? A lot of leadership is how can I engage? Especially like, say, for example, in higher education, leadership is really about fundraising. And so how do I engage people to, want to donate? And charisma is a big piece of that. Building trust. Does that leader actually take time to build trust? Psychologically, people are more likely to follow someone that they believe is competent, relatable, and acting in their best interests. And as I'm talking, you might be thinking about other things. I think in the current world we're in, you might be thinking about leaders in a political, landscape. And, these principles would also apply. Now, that being said, there are, very little data to truly analyze and understand, for example, how countries operate. We can think about this when it comes, down to, companies, but the idea of countries are really unheard of. Now, if there's a listener out there that knows of something else, please let me know. But, a lot of leaders might not invite the public into understanding their process, and certainly not, for an assessment, and that's the thing about corporate world that's much different. And it's curious to me as a psychologist because, people that hold these high offices in the socio-political climate are not required to have a psychological evaluation, even though other types of professions might require it, such as law enforcement, clergy. And so I would like to kind of make the positioning here to say, I do believe that assessments are critical. That's what helps, that's data, and it really helps us. And so another piece about this are group dynamics and social identity. So people are naturally drawn to groups, and leaders often emerge or are selected because they represent the values or identity of that group. And that's, it could be a group of, 3 or a group of millions. A leader who understands that shared identity of the team will foster stronger cohesion, commitment, and a sense of shared purpose. You see this in lots of different groups. Perhaps you were watching, Netflix, or for example, there's lots of different shows on cults. And that's what we're thinking about. One person in the cult kind of emerges as the leader, people follow, and it creates that commitment, this sort of shared purpose, which can be used as a weapon in some ways. The role of framing. What does a leader do in terms of framing? How a leader frames a situation dramatically impacts how people perceive it. So they are effective leaders are skilled at framing issues in a way that resonates with their audience and motivates them to action. So a leader is trying to get people to act. And while that could feel manipulative, and there is always a manipulative policy, principle, if you will, and I think manipulation gets a negative term, and obviously it is a negative term. But a leader, one of the things I'll say often is that you sort of need to be a little sociopathic to be a leader. And that's going to be a little controversial. And what that means is I need to have apathy. So I'm throwing all these psychological terms at you. Apathy is like a lack of emotion, and a sociopath is a person that responds and acts without emotion. So oftentimes, like these serial killers that we've watched on shows or whatnot, those are probably identified as such, a sociopath. So you sort of need that, because sometimes in life, when you're making these tough decisions, you might not need the emotion to kind of dictate that. So again, that's like going to be somewhat controversial, but it's a little bit of balance. I think you need a leader that has a little bit of both. A colleague of mine does a lot of work in emotional intelligence around leadership. That, to me, is probably one of the more effective leaders, especially in the corporate and sports worlds. There are so we're thinking about psychology of decision making and communication. So these are some points here to make about cognitive biases. Every person has cognitive biases. These are confirmation bias, meaning you might keep people around you that confirm your answers. They won't challenge you. Anchoring bias, this is relying too heavily on the first piece of information you get. So kind of like bookending it. The first thing you get is all you think about. And then groupthink, that suppresses dissenting opinions. And so these are things to be aware of. They exist in social conditioning. And so just being aware kind of helps for better decision-making, being more rational, being more objective. You want to seek diverse perspectives when it comes to this instead of actively challenge it. You don't want to just accept what is right there. I mentioned already emotional intelligence, but also there is a power of empathy. So leaders with high emotional intelligence, they will understand to manage their own emotions as well as respond to their team's emotions, top down, bottom up. Communicating is not just about transmitting information. It's about building connection and inspiring. So what is the messaging? I want to have heads of communication that are collaborative and kind, because we're sharing information. We're not trying to be combative, because combative communication will push people away. So there are, lastly, you want to have effective communication styles. They need to be clear, concise, and authentic. And, authentic to a manner that aligns with the organization or with the group that they are leading. So there are ethics around leadership. There's a responsibility. And so ethically, where are leaders' moral compasses? It's acting with integrity, transparency, and a commitment to the well-being of all the stakeholders. And so this does require courage, right? Because you might have to go against the grain, kind of challenge people around their belief systems. One thing I hear a lot when I'm working with companies is we've always done it this way. And of course, in a psychological principle, we say if you've always done something one way, that is the definition of insanity. You want to be, flexible in thinking about other ways of doing it. You need a term that's being thrown out a lot is about, we're saying cultural humility, but really just humility and self-awareness. So best leaders are really humble and self-aware, so they can have that strong, assertive nature. They can be charismatic, and you can also be self-aware, identifying your strengths and weaknesses. If everything that they say is, this is the best, I'm the best, if that's constantly the sort of verbiage that's used, that will desensitize the audience. And so you want to have a bit of humility, even if you don't feel it, that's part of the manipulation piece. And so you could be both authentic and skillful. That's the way we think about it. This is the middle path I keep bringing to you. So if you're listening to this being like, Dr. Pete keeps saying things, both ends of the coin, there's a truth to that, because that's what we're trying to do, is find the middle path. And lastly, what is leadership like in this changing world? It is changing, and rapidly. Technology is certainly having a dramatic impact on how people lead. We need leaders who are adaptable, resilient, and able to navigate complexities. So this requires a collaboration, innovation, and a commitment to continuous learning. And so ask yourself, if you're the one that's leading, are you, open to learning? Are you open to feedback from, your team? Ray Dalio, wrote about this in his principles and says, you want that feedback. You want your team, especially your C-suite, your executive team, to be able to give you the tough feedback. Hey, you weren't on your game today. Oh, you really missed the point today. Or, this is something that we need to work on. So look, leadership is difficult. Kind of like I say in the world of sports, not everyone's, not every great athlete becomes a coach. And so some of us, and not every, and some of the greatest coaches were not the best athletes, if you think about it in that way. So you want to think about the identity of the organization, your leadership style, how to frame certain things, where are your biases and self-awareness, acknowledge emotional intelligence and empathy. What is your communication style? And notice that the goal is to be collaborative in communication. What's your ethical and moral compass? How self-aware, and what's your humility around this? And are you adapting to the change in the world? These are the kind of concepts of leadership as we think about them today in the world of business. So I thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, please email or comments on this. We'd love to have some, we'll have guests on that lead all different types of organizations. And so, like, share, and follow, and all at official Dr. Pete. Until then, spread a little kindness and stay well.